Portland, Oregon is going to start to evict residents at homeless shelters who are unwilling to engage with services. You believe this? Is Portland really going to kick its homeless population to the curb? Let's get into it. Here we go.
We're learning more about Portland Mayor Keith Wilson's plan to evict shelter residents who do not engage with supportive services such as drug and alcohol treatment.
And Fox Soul's McKenna Marks joins us live now from City Hall with the latest updates on this. And McKenna, what exactly does this plan look like and how are local shelters reacting?
Yeah, good evening, Nora, Pete. Well, Mayor Wilson sent out a memo to City Council on Tuesday detailing his plan to evict up to 90 residents at alternative shelters. Now, according to this memo, if a resident at an alternative shelter has been there for 120 days without using those supportive services, they will be asked to leave. Now, one Portland nonprofit tells me that while these shelters are designed to be temporary housing, it's deadlines like this one that could cause more harm than good. On Tuesday, Portland Mayor Keith Wilson sent a memo to City Council. The memo announces the city's plan to evict residents at alternative homeless shelters like tiny home villages if they don't engage with supportive services in 120 days. The new policy is scheduled to take effect in February. In his memo, Wilson said these alternative shelters were always meant to serve as temporary housing and that the city has a responsibility to encourage homeless individuals to progress through the system and eventually secure permanent housing. Wilson says, quote, "Exiting due to stay limits only occurs after many months or in some cases years of persistent attempts to connect and collaborate with no level of engagement. Stay limits requirements include a formal warning process that communicates the policy, options for engagement, and consequences for non-engagement," end quote. In this case, supportive services could include obtaining employment, housing applications, or even addiction treatment. In his memo, Wilson also says this policy will impact 80 to 90 people, but exceptions will be made for residents experiencing severe mental health issues. Cultivate Initiatives, a nonprofit that operates the Menlo Park Safe Rest Village in Southeast Portland, tells me they're concerned this new 120-day deadline could cause further damage to the homeless community. In a statement, the nonprofit says, quote, "People who have experienced long-term homelessness are not unhoused because of a lack of personal capacity or motivation. More often, they are where they are because at critical moments in their lives, they were failed by fragmented and under-resourced systems." And
100% nonsense. They have chosen a lifestyle of drugs, plain and simple. You have built the homeless industrial complex, not only in Portland, but in Seattle, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in all of these cities, and many, many, many other cities as well. But these cities that I just mentioned, they are the ones that are having the most visible battle with homelessness. And it's comments like these. They were failed by fragmented and under-resourced systems. You know, we had the same resources not that long ago, and we didn't have the homeless population that we do now. We didn't have the homeless population that we do now. We've always had a bunch of what we used back in the day called winos, what we called bums, terms we're not supposed to use anymore because they're not endearing to that population. But you've literally created a homeless industrial complex, and these people you're coddling by saying that, oh, you've been failed by fragmented and under-resourced systems. It's okay. Just go out there and keep doing your drugs. We know you've been in here for 4 months. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're looking good, Tiger. You're looking good.
Quote, Cultivate Initiative said if the goal is to move people into permanent housing, the city needs to address the systemic issues that contribute to homelessness in the first place. The nonprofit says shelter works best when it's paired with real pathways out, saying, quote, ending unsheltered houselessness requires investing in what actually moves people forward. Employment,
unsheltered houselessness? That's a term now? Unsheltered houselessness. How many other ridiculous, non-descriptive words, unsheltered houselessness, are we going to use to just say, hey, you know what? People are out on the streets because they want to do a bunch of drugs, and that's what they do, and you've enabled it to happen. Are you happy with it? No, not happy. Well, then do something about it. All this Mickey Mousing around it doesn't really do anything at the end of the day. This whole notion of getting people in for 4 months into a shelter, you got to get them off the drugs so that they can maybe get a job. Otherwise, you got to go right to that either mental psych ward or jail, wherever they need to belong, wherever they should be. But this whole temporary thing in order to get them through and then threatening to kick them out, I mean, I get it. You've got to have deadlines. You've got to have, a little bit of pushback. But it's like the parent that says, you know what? I've said it 45 times. I'm going to put you in a timeout unless you keep calling your brother a little bitch. You know what I mean? You can't call your brother that word anymore. It's not nice, and he's not one of those. And, we don't do that here. And the kid just keeps going and going and going. And then after a while, you're like, I'm going to throw you out. I'm going to throw you out. And you're like, okay, yeah, you've jammed up the system for 4 months. The whole homeless industrial complex is so screwed up in so many different directions. And specifically what we're talking about here, we're talking about shelter versus permanent housing. Shelter being temporary, people get for a little while, and then maybe they go into permanent housing. How many permanent housing people do we need to have on the dole in Portland, in Seattle, in LA, that are just there because they're doing a bunch of drugs and they don't want to be responsible members of society? They should, in order to get housing like that, they should have to prove that they're clean or they're attempting to get clean, because anything else just isn't working. And I see a lot of folks that have permanent supportive housing and a tent in the homeless complex, a tent in the big homeless tent system. It's wild. And sometimes two. 𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗪 had one where the woman had 2 tents and her own apartment. I mean, who doesn't want that, right?
Affordable housing, rental assistance, landlord partnerships, and supportive services that meet people where they are.
It's literally like, at long last, a parent is coming at a child with a little bit of tough love, just a tiny little bit. But it's the whole factor that you've had years and years and years of training. Hey, you can do drugs in Portland. You can do drugs out in the open. I mean, literally, Measure 110 basically decriminalized and legalized hard drugs. Hey, come shoot up heroin in Portland on the streets. It's all good. We'll even give you a clean needle. It's all fine. You're dandy. You're in good shape here. And then, lo and behold, we found out that, addiction and overdoses just absolutely skyrocket. Oh, we better reel that one in. That was some terrible policy. And now you've got a policy where, okay, after 4 months, we're going to have to boot you out unless you engage with services. And the problem is most of these people do not want to engage with services because they want to keep doing their drugs. They want to keep doing their drugs. They have no interest in services. They have no interest in getting clean. They just want to keep, not everybody. There are always examples of people that are breaking out and that are making it. But for every 20, there's maybe one that has half a chance of actually getting that done. But, for people like 𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗪, it is literally that 0.5% of whatever chance it is that person might actually get sober one day and become a contributing member of society. That is worth it for them to battle for these people who are literally at their wits' end. But, dumping them back out on the streets, then you've got the same damn problem. You've just got a bunch of people out on the streets, just, you're just shaking the box out on the street, and all these people, end up in tents and just an absolute dumpster fire. And that is why so many terrible things have happened to the city of Portland, because the underpinnings are terrible policy that nobody is really willing to look at and or change. Did a podcast not long ago. What was it? 2 days ago? That was last week, about the Ritz-Carlton in Portland. 50% off sale, just whacked across the board, all their condos, their upper end condos. These are condos that were at one time, $3, $4, $5 million. And now they're half. And a lot of that has to do with street conditions in Portland. You've got areas that you just got a whole bunch of homeless people, and you got people in tents, and you got drug addicts running around, and you got, drug dealers feeding them the dope, right? And so, working through all these things, it's interesting to watch, over years and years and years, a political system like Oregon, because it is so liberal, it is so progressive. They don't want to step on anybody's toes, but they're letting people die. They're letting people die by the dozens. Oh yeah, go ahead, do your drugs. And now they're saying, well, unless you get help, unless you get into the services, got to kick you out, got to move you on. It's like, man, just need some tough love, which is, hey, we're going to give you, shelter. You can get into shelter, but you can't be outwardly doing the drugs like you are. You got to have a clean UA. And if you're committing crimes out on the streets, we're going to arrest you, and we're going to prosecute you, and we're going to put you in jail. But you don't have that. You don't have that in Portland. You don't have that in Seattle. You got a little bit more of that in San Francisco. But by and large, in a lot of these communities where this kind of behavior is prevalent, it's a free-for-all. And that is why property values are dragged down. And that is why your downtown core is hollowed out. All three of those cities, to a massive degree, it has to do with street conditions. And once you've created street conditions like what we know here, big corporations are a hard no-go because they've got options. They can take their businesses and move them elsewhere or not move them into a Portland. And that's exactly what you've got going on. So Wilson's announcement, the mayor's announcement, comes in an especially inconvenient time. This is an inconvenient truth. Coming months, Multnomah County will close 2 of its 24/7 shelters, Market Street and Y East, that have, I don't know how to pronounce that, Y East, yeah, that have 210 beds combined. And a lot of this is happening because of budget constraints. Don't have the money. Don't have the money rolling in from your downtown core. Don't have the business tax coming in. Don't have the new businesses getting taxed. You don't have the sale of real estate because nothing's going on. And when you do have a real estate sale, it is wildly diminished the amount of tax revenue that the city gets because those property values have dropped so significantly. You covered Big Pink. One of the biggest buildings in Portland, sold for a fraction. It was what, 85, 90% off of a value from not that long ago, less than a decade ago, something like that. I mean, those numbers, they tell the tale, right? You got a little bit of this impact from your downtown cores from work from home. I mean, not a little bit, a lot. But other cities have come back that didn't allow their street conditions to absolutely deteriorate like they have here. Exiting is a last resort, Wilson said. Exiting due to state limits only occurs after months or in some cases years of persistent attempts to connect and collaborate with no level of engagement. Well, instead of on the back end, all right, we got to boot you out. It's been 4 months. It's been 120 days. You got to go because you're not engaging. On the front end, yeah, we'll get you the help you need, but here's the commitment we need you to make. And the problem is that most of these people have no commitment to ever making that. They'll take your housing and they'll say thank you, and then they'll take your tent and then they'll go set it up in the tent encampment. And that's where there's this massive, massive disconnect. So any of this stuff is almost just like, I mean, you're literally playing whack-a-mole. Well, you're either going to have them here or you're going to have them here, but you're not going to have them in treatment because nobody's volunteering to go there. Nobody. How many drug addicts do you actually hear go, you know what? I woke up today and I got to get a new gig because this one ain't working out. It is so often, what is the prompt for so many of these people to get sober? Getting sent to jail, cleaning up in jail, maybe a light prison sentence. So by doing this diversion nonsense, we're not helping a lot of people. We are literally killing them. Because the drugs that they have now are so strong. And you take a little bit, the wrong way, and boom, you're dead. Shelter works best when it is paired with real pathways out and when people are supported, not displaced on their journey to housing. I mean, that is true. But, there's this idea, and then there's the reality of the streets of Portland are loaded with homelessness that isn't getting better. I mean, I watch a lot of Kevin Dahlgren and his stories about just going into homeless communities and just the crazy stuff going on in Portland. Absolute, like, what is happening in Portland? Those kind of stories. And this stuff isn't necessarily getting better. It's not getting better because the addicts have worked it out. Hey, everybody is covering for us. Everybody is covering for us. But then what happens with that is you've got that whole lifestyle, and then it meets up with reality, which is, well, we've only got so many beds and we got to move them on. If you haven't, engaged with services after 4 months, then you got to go. Here's those last 2 shelters. It's pretty rough. Homeless on Edge is Multnomah County set to close 2 shelters.
Closed in March, and one man we spoke to says he just started staying at the shelter only weeks ago, and now the closure could force him back onto the streets.
I just heard about it from one of the guys inside today. I had no clue.
Jim Robinson says he is in shock.
Today.
Tonight, 2 homeless shelters are set to close in Multnomah County, and those who rely on both shelters, most are on edge about what is next.
Fox 12's Michaela Armstrong spoke to one man who says the shelter was a step up, and now this could set him back.
This is one of the shelters that will soon be closed in March, and one man we spoke to says he just started staying at the shelter only weeks ago, and now the closure could force him back onto the streets.
I just heard about it from one of the guys inside today. I had no clue.
Jim Robinson says he is in shock now that he knows time is ticking for him and others at 2 Multnomah County homeless shelters, 𝗧𝗧𝗏 and Market Street.
It's pretty rough.
𝗧𝗧𝗏.
Turn around going, oh, there's programs for this, there's programs for that. And then you go to talk to the people that, trying to run these programs, and everything's getting shut down.
Robinson says he just got into 𝗧𝗧𝗏 a few weeks ago and says it is a major move up from the streets and other shelters he has stayed at before.
Beds are full every night. This place is on a waiting list. I'm a vet, and it still took me a week to get in.
According to the county.
What's so interesting is they always take somebody to tell their story that I don't think that this guy isn't a drug addict. He doesn't have the impacts to his face, to his skin. He's not, looking like that, and talking to you in just gibberish. He does not appear to be whacked out of his mind. Who knows? Maybe he's a heavy drinker. Who knows? But he doesn't look that way. They always interview those people, and they don't go out to the homeless encampments and actually interview people, long term in their tents. Hey, this is going on. What do you think about that? So often you don't see that. You know why they don't do that? Because those places are scary, and you might get shot. You might get killed in homeless encampments because you're literally taking your life in your own hands by going in there. And I typically only go into these places when Andrea Suarez is there. Andrea's going to protect me, right? No, it's just that, she has a comfort zone. She knows who most of these people are. And I rely upon her that we're not going to get killed. But, the whole thing is just so complex.
Both shelters were facing closures, not because of performance issues, but they were not viable long term. So as a part of the 2025 to 2026 budget process last spring, the board voted unanimously to fund both shelters only through March of this year. And instead, the board was able to fund supportive housing for hundreds. But Robinson says this decision isn't in the best interest of those who rely on these shelters.
It's kind of shaking everybody up because nobody knows where they're going to go or what they're going to do. You just have more people on the street. You're not getting them in housing. They're nowhere else to go.
And now he says the move could force him back on the streets yet again.
I don't know, because I don't know where in the hell I'll go. Trying to hope and find housing before then, but I don't know.
The county did tell us when closing any shelter, the Homeless Services Department works to transition guests into housing or other shelters. In Southeast Portland, Michaela Armstrong, Fox 12 Oregon.
The saga of Portland's homelessness continues. Saga of Seattle's homelessness continues. And a lot of it has to do with they haven't taken a hardline approach to the underlying cause of homelessness, which is typically drugs. Well, they don't want to address that. They don't want to talk about that because then you'd have to actually address, well, how can we involuntarily put people into treatment? How can we involuntarily put people into mental health care? How can we do that? Because that is viewed as authoritarianism, right? And that's what kings do, and no kings except when they're the king of Venezuela and they're basically an outlaw narco terrorist, and then we support him. Free Maduro, and you're left with, what are you doing? It's those kind of people that end up, creating policy where you've got the kind of things going on in San Francisco, in Portland, in Seattle, in LA. It's those people who create these policies, and then you end up with situations like this, which is the homeless become a hot potato. Are they going to be in their tent? Are they going to be in their supportive housing, in their permanent housing? Are they going to be in their temporary shelter? Or, where are they going to be? And you've basically got the blind leading the blind. And most of the homeless, they've got their own drill down, and it's at the expense of the taxpayer, and it's a never-ending merry-go-round. It just keeps going round and round and round and round. Wild stuff. It's a complex for a reason, because those that are getting paid by the complex, they have zero interest in making sure that homelessness actually gets addressed. Because if they did, they'd be out of a job. Weird. Yeah. Wild stuff. Thanks so much for being here. I'd love to have you subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with friends and family. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for being here. Bye for now.